Hey guys, I'm Brent.
I'm Lila, and you can find us on the web at www.braintrustlive.com.
Yeah. Happy
Happy
Easter.
Easter!
It's Easter
We,
today. You'll be
as you
listening tomorrow,
know,
but
only observe one religious holiday on this podcast. I'm not counting Christmas as a religious holiday because that's a consumer holiday. But
right.
um, the only holiday that we acknowledge and celebrate that's not like May Day is Easter. It is because we have a tradition of every year.
Right.
Me, a person who continues to not really understand what Easter is about, asking Brent for the story of Easter. And we
Right.
decided,
Usually I tell it to Lila. Yeah.
right. And that's because I have an issue retaining information about Easter because
Uh-huh.
it doesn't follow like a logical series of story events.
Yeah, well, that's what she,
There's,
Lila texted me this afternoon. She was like, "I'm going to tell you about Easter on this podcast," and I got very excited. I was like, "Oh,
right.
I'm here for this." And then she was
We,
like, as she goes, "I think I have some of the pieces down, but it doesn't really have much of an arc." And I said, "Well, as it turns out, there's some plot holes in the Easter story." I mean, I'm a person who celebrates Easter. I just went to church this afternoon, but I can acknowledge that there's a reason why maybe a non-Christian person has trouble putting it all together.
yeah. So we're going to try something new this week, this year. And I'm going to try to tell Brent the story of Easter, and he is going to interject with, I don't know what, thoughts, feelings. It was tremendously
Yeah.
helpful to me when we just started calling it Zombie Jesus
Yes.
Day, because then I was sort of like before, like Easter just doesn't paint a picture the way that Zombie Jesus does. Um, but so I feel like the first plot hole that I encounter when I try to think about the story of Easter, and maybe the reason I've never been able to sort of like get the story going, is that I don't understand why any of the things happened. Like
Mm,
I know they obviously were like very mean to Jesus and like
sure.
crucified him, which is very rude and hurts, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, if you know,
I'm sure
I
that it
mean, being nailed
does.
to a cross would be very
Yeah.
painful. Um, I don't know what he was doing to have earned that treatment, and I don't know why everyone seemed cool with that in the time, because it just seems like it would be unpleasant in general to watch someone be crucified, even if you were mad at them, because it
Sure.
sounds a little, you know,
Yeah, well, he was going
gory.
around talking about being the Messiah, so that was scary to certainly
Oh,
the
sure. And you
people
know
in the
what?
church. And he was also, he
As
was
I am in the middle of the vow, I can see why that would be alarming to people in in any society. So,
yeah.
I mean, I guess you do have to be careful when people are walking around saying they're the Messiah, because oftentimes that is actually just a sex trafficking operation. People who say they're the Messiah, who
Yeah,
say that they are going to save you in any
right.
context.
More on sex trafficking later, by the way.
That's right. It'd be a sex trafficking heavy Easter podcast. Um, but so I feel like, I guess, so he's out there, he gets crucified,
Yeah.
he's looking pretty bad after that. And then I think they like put him in a cave or something.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
then
Uh-huh. A
he,
tomb, a sepulcher, if you will.
sure, any of those words. And then
Mhm.
my memory of it is just, I have one distinct memory of what happens next, which is the sense that he maybe exits the tomb but leaves his clothing behind, which means that he wanders around naked for a while post death. And I have some
Yeah.
like questions about what he was doing during that time.
Well, everyone does. And
Right.
also there's different tellings of it in different gospels, which is also, these people who
Um,
sort of like get hung up on the literalness of the Bible. It's like, okay, well, which gospel am I supposed to
right.
go with from the, I mean, in one, there's an angel in there. In another, there's just a person in there, like who has sort of like found, like, is the person who
Oh,
is like
like in the
finds that he is
tomb.
like no longer in that. Right. Yes, exactly.
So in one of
Yeah.
them, an angel gets left behind to explain to everyone what happened, or
Something like
he is
that.
the angel.
Yes. I don't even remember. No,
An angel's
not he is an
involved.
angel. There's an, yes.
He's
Right.
gone. He's wandering naked through the desert or whatever he's up to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But an angel is there to tell the story of the
Hmm.
time that he rose from the dead.
Yeah.
Now, at, as we now know, it was fairly common for people to be buried alive in those days because there was no real medicine. And so no one really knew who was dead and who wasn't. So I have some suspicions about how this all happened.
Well, I think we can pretty much assume that the crucifixion probably did kill him, but
Right. We might have
we don't.
questions about what happened next.
Sure.
I have a lot of
Yes, you
questions about
might.
what happened next. Because so from what I understand, so he's wandering around naked in the desert or whatever. No one really knows what he's up to. And then does he get like abducted by aliens or something? Like then does he disappear? Like what happens?
No, there's no aliens really. I mean, he
No.
sort of is around for a while as
Is he still
he's
saying
not
he's the
really
Messiah?
he's not really necessarily like in his human form per se. I mean, he is in the sense that he's
Oh,
appearing to
sure.
people as himself, right?
Right.
But
Oh, this is how they explain
like,
away his lack of clothing. I just feel like evangelical Christians in particular don't seem like the kind of people who are trying to expose their children to like crazy, naked, wandering people who just escaped near death experiences.
Streaker
Like
Jesus.
Streaker Jesus doesn't seem like that would be their
No,
cup of tea.
no,
I was
it's probably
wondering
not.
how they explain
Although I
his.
bet people back then were like naked way more
Well, I was going to say it might have
than
been not
normal.
notable at the time.
Right.
So who's to know?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Does he gather?
We've probably clothed Jesus in the same way that we have whitewashed him.
That's right.
We have given him clothes and white skin.
And exactly. Did he? So after he's wandering, does he like gather a following at that point so that people can watch him be abducted by
Well,
aliens or whatever happens?
he goes and sort of like shows himself to, the disciples and and Mary Magdalene and some of his other followers or whatever. And then sort of like and then they ultimately are the people who sort of like go out and then like really kind of like form the church, right? Um
Right.
from there essentially. So it's basically sort of like him being with them again, kind of like almost, and
Like a
I don't
last
know.
hurrah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
They have like a
One,
final party, a
yeah,
goodbye
uh-huh.
party.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then he what? He does he fly away at that point?
Yeah, he ascends. Uh-huh.
He is and do they
Yeah, now
watch
he's in
like
heaven.
is it
He's at the right hand.
do they do they watch him ascend as if he's
No.
being abducted? I think that's why I think maybe aliens were involved
You're
because it
looking for
seems
some
like
sort of scene with like like a
he's
tunnel
being
of light like going
teleported
up
up
into the heavens.
into
I see.
space.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I don't think so. I mean, maybe. I mean,
no,
look, I'm not a Bible
that's
historian,
disappointing.
obviously.
I feel like if you were to ask Scientologists, there could be potentially an alien angle here. I
Oh,
mean, there are
well,
religions that have taken similar tales and added aliens to them. So
sure.
maybe you're
Uh-huh.
just not looking at the right
I was
interpretations
gonna
of
say,
the
I
text.
haven't been watching Ancient Aliens enough, I guess,
No, that's
right?
yeah, I haven't been watching it at all, so I feel really uninformed on this point.
I mean,
It just
were angels aliens? We don't know. Maybe they were.
that's true. Were
People
angels
flying down from the
angels?
sky?
We also don't know that. Today, it's earlier, it sounded like we heard a ghost in our house, and I said, please show yourself, but nothing happened. And then I said, if you're an animal, please don't show yourself. And then nothing happened again. And so we had our own brush with the supernatural earlier today.
Sure.
Um,
Sounds like
so
that's terrifying.
what do we take from Easter? Because that is
Well,
a that I don't
the
have
the
down.
takeaway is
Don't get
that
crucified.
sure. This is sort of like really kind of like what makes Christianity different from any of the other holidays. I mean, or other
Easter.
religions, essentially, in the
Okay.
sense that, like, I mean, Jewish people don't care whether Jesus was born, right?
Right.
Like that's fine. It's sort of it's this area where we get into sort of like the resurrection and like him being the Messiah that sort of like changes everything, right? So like this is
Right.
sort of like, I mean, really sort of the bigger of the holidays in terms of sort of like what it means for the specific religion. And it's also sort of like it's the whole sort of like died for your sins, right?
Oh, right.
It's in his death and new life that we have new life, like through the reborn Christ, you know,
So once he's reborn, we
or risen Christ, I guess.
once he's risen, once he's abducted by aliens,
Uh-huh.
we can feel like all of the sins that we don't remember committing are forgiven.
Yeah. Hmm.
We're forgiven for all the things we didn't actually do.
Yeah. It's this specific thing which
Great.
allows a lot of Christians to really feel like they can be real awful people.
That's so true. Yeah, so this is the holiday that justifies judgmental
Right.
assholes being judgmental assholes.
Right.
Good, good, good. And here's a follow-up question. I have taken it upon myself this year to announce that I'm celebrating Easter Monday, which is
Mm.
a holiday after Easter that I made up, that I
Where the
decided
Easter
at
candy
some
is on
point.
sale.
Well, I feel like there's places where people take Easter, the Monday after Easter, off. And
Oh.
I'm trying to make that happen because it sounds like, here's where I really find fault with Easter. Don't
Uh-huh.
have a holiday on a Sunday, have a holiday on a Wednesday.
Oh.
Use your
Yeah.
heads. You can't be putting holidays on days that people already have off of work anyway.
Right.
It's not,
Well,
that's not helpful to anyone.
a lot of people
Half
have Good Friday off.
days on Good Friday. People take half days on Good Friday. You
Yeah.
want a full day.
You want a full
What
day,
is
yeah.
a holiday without a full day off?
Yeah.
And then you have to waste a Sunday in church, which means that you didn't even get your full weekend at the end of Easter. So
Sure.
I am proposing slash stealing from the Italians or somebody Easter
Sure.
Monday,
Easter
a holiday
Monday, yeah.
that people can take to take back the holiday day that was stolen from them
Yeah.
by Jesus being abducted by aliens.
We could just
You know?
change it to and on the fourth day he rose from the dead, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
the third day. It doesn't matter how many days he was in there.
They made up the number of days anyway. How do you know about a thing that is supernatural? Like, how do you know the specific date upon which it happened? You don't. This is all speculation anyway. I just feel like one of the things that is nice about Passover, which is the equivalent holiday
Yeah.
of, the equivalent spring holiday in the Judeo-Christian tradition, is that it like goes on for days.
Well, that's what I was going
So
to
it's
say.
like
Jewish
you do
people
a
really know how to
Yes.
stretch out a holiday, which is
Yes.
one thing that I admire about them.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that I feel like a lot of these Christian holidays are very efficient. It's like even
Yeah.
with Christmas,
You
it's like
get
that's one of the
day.
biggest holidays of the year. You get 1 to 2 days off.
Yeah.
That's who needs it.
No, I
Take a
know.
week off.
Yeah, we
Like,
need a whole month. We need like
a
Ramadan.
month. Exactly. Right. I mean, it just makes good sense.
I agree.
I guess Lent is sort of that, except that you're supposed to give things up during that time, which
I
makes
was
it
going
not
to say
fun.
that Lent is a whole like somber situation. So like
Unless you are living in a country like maybe Spain where they're just having parades the whole time. I've noticed that
that sounds
Mardi
nice.
Gras extends into late into Lent in a lot of places.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, I would like
Because-
that. That would be good too. Yeah.
Yeah, if they could have parades every day, I mean, that would be fine. That would be a good way to pass the month.
Yeah.
It just feels like it's missing one full guaranteed holiday.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And then I think it could take, because it has a lot of the things that Christmas has. It has good candy, some
Yep.
of the most important candy of the year, some might say.
Yep.
It has oftentimes people giving you that candy, which is like gifts,
Yep.
which is what makes Christmas so spectacular, is that it's consumer holiday. It's in the spring, so the weather's finally nice. So it's
Beautiful today.
It's even better than Christmas in terms of weather, but
Yep.
it doesn't get the same glory. And I think it is because of the problematic always being on a
Sure.
Sunday.
You get to eat a ham if that's your thing.
Sure, it's not my thing, I'll tell you that. But I've heard other people
Nor
go
mine.
on about the hams. People love the hams, the Easter
Yeah.
hams.
Yeah. This is when honey baked ham really.
Yeah, I
goes for it.
wonder if, that honey baked ham that was in our neighborhood in LA finally closed because it was next to a Glatt kosher market, and that always struck me as a little
It
bizarre.
was right in the middle of like
Of like a Hasidic neighborhood.
So
Somebody came from like Atlanta and thought, you know what, they need a ham store here. I haven't seen a single ham store. Just this Glatt kosher market doesn't sell any pork products. Where are people going to get their hams?
Oh man.
Did you have ham in honor of
No. Mm-mm.
Easter? Are you going to have it in honor of Easter Monday?
I
A
haven't had
holiday
pork
that we're not celebrating?
I haven't had pork in years.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I conveniently forget about your veganizing.
You know, I've not been vegan in quite some time, but I have resisted eating pork and beef.
I did
lately.
have a tiny bit of bacon today, which I feel.
Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I don't eat it, but like I get the need to want to eat bacon.
It makes me feel like I celebrated Easter.
Yeah, there you go.
A way that it was intended to be celebrated.
Yeah.
Just felt right. In any case, that's the story of Easter. Once again, I don't know if it makes any more sense to me now.
I like that we've added aliens to it this year. Previously,
It
we
just
only had
that
zombies, and now there's aliens.
I know it. I was thinking as I was thinking about how I would tell the story. It occurred to me that no one had ever adequately explained to me this whole shooting off into space slash the heavens slash whatever you're
Mhm.
calling it, and I felt like that was an opportunity to introduce other kinds of
Sure.
potentially potentially supernatural life
Uh
into,
huh.
into
Yeah,
the
I like it.
conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you have to do things to make sense of.
getting
Uh,
closer to being an action movie, I think, every time that we tell it.
well, I mean, there have been action movies, maybe not action movies, but I mean,
I
certainly
wouldn't call them action movies.
some. No, but I mean, like, it has those
there's
elements. Yes.
there's been Mel Gibson movies.
Yeah, that's true. There's a new one on Discovery Plus that looks really terrible. I've been seeing the commercials for it, and it
I'm
does
shocked.
not look good.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. Oh
In any
boy.
case, so that's Easter.
Should we
We
do news?
also we had exciting news this week. More exciting attacks on the Capitol.
Yeah, I
People
guess we're
just can't
just
get enough.
attacking the Capitol now. I mean, this is
That's what
obviously
we
like
do.
a completely different situation, scenario, way different.
Right. But
But
that's, I
like,
think, the worst version of it, because that just means people are indiscriminately attacking the Capitol for any reason.
right,
Not
you can just,
even, it's not even trying to do terrorism. It's just like an unhappy person just attack the Capitol.
yeah, he was just depressed.
Yeah.
And he
Just like attack a
was,
different building.
yeah, exactly.
It's like,
He was part of, oh, what's Majink? The, Nation of Islam, but it doesn't
a
even
nation,
seem like that was
right.
a,
Like the
a,
news mentions
a
that in every
thing,
story.
really.
And
Yeah.
like, look, I'm not here to tell you that Louis Farrakhan's a great guy.
Nope.
He was posting on Facebook about that. It's not great. I don't know that explains why he would attack the Capitol, though. I think
No,
that was
it
just a
doesn't.
thing people were seizing onto because they had no idea why he would do this.
Right, exactly. Well, that's the thing. I mean, it seemed pretty free of motive, and I think that
Yeah,
that was sort of like the only thing that anyone could latch onto. But like, there's nothing about the specific attack that feels like it was motivated in any sense by that, really. So,
no, no.
um,
It's just like so random 25-year-old. He rammed his car into the northern entrance. He then like got out and like started like attacking officers with a knife. An
yeah,
officer died. He killed an officer.
yeah,
And then another one got injured. So it was like pretty gory over there. And it's created a kind of uncomfortable conversation for a number of reasons. One being that I am finding myself accidentally agreeing with Republicans on something,
it's not great.
which I hate, but I also am mad at them because it is them that created the problem that I am mad about.
Right.
Because recently Republicans have been complaining about all of the security that they put up at the Capitol after the January 6th coup
Yep.
attempt. Um, and even Mitch McConnell was going on about how it reminded him of Kabul and blah, blah, blah. And like, I get that because that is the people's house. And in
Yep.
my opinion, the people should have access to the people's house. And I also feel like if you're a government that is so unpopular that people are trying to attack you, you should do some inward thinking to yourself about what
Yeah.
has created that dynamic. Mitch McConnell is not who gets to make that comment, though. Like, he's not doing that because he cares about your right to political speech. He's doing that
Yeah.
just to be a pest because it's his fucking fault that they have all the security at the Capitol, which I guess thankfully prevented this guy randomly ramming his car into the Capitol from being a bigger incident. But they did
Yeah.
have to go onto lockdown. But they had just removed some of this, perimeter fencing that they had put up after January 6th.
Yeah.
And they had just reopened some of the streets to traffic. And now we're probably going to have to go back to some kind of horrific lockdown. And that's annoying because that interferes with democracy.
Yeah.
And
It
I
does.
dislike that I am having to say that, knowing that that same talking point got seized on by those January 6th coups.
Yeah.
And knowing that obviously I don't mean that right extends to your right to have a violent insurrection. But
Does
I
not.
am annoyed that their idiocy and the condoning of their idiocy by people like Mitch McConnell has meant that people like me are going to have our access to the Capitol cut off because
Yep.
idiots can't stop being idiots. And Mitch McConnell is both right that it would be nice if they didn't have as much security and also a complete asshole because it's his fucking fault. So
Totally.
this whole incident brought up a lot of complicated thoughts for me.
Yeah. Well, and I also feel like the one thing that has been another, negative aspect of, I mean, everything about what happened on the 6th was terrible, but I mean, I feel like it has also led to sort of like a little unease by people to sort of like call for large scale protests also. I mean,
Right,
and at the Capitol too. I mean, like we should be marching at the Capitol, right? Like, I
right,
mean, like when they said that they weren't going to put the $15 minimum wage in, we should have marched at the Capitol, we should, but I feel,
exactly.
and I'm not saying that there was necessarily the motivation for people to be doing that anyway at the time, or whether there were enough people to make an
Right,
impact. But what I'm saying is that I feel like oftentimes you will sort of like hear calls for these types of marches, not for insurrections, obviously. But I feel
hopefully.
like the fact that one caused an insurrection, I feel like has people a little on edge about whether it's okay to be doing that. And it is okay to be doing that. It's okay.
Yeah,
As you said, it's okay for you to go to the Capitol. It's okay for lawmakers to say, "Hey, let's go march at the Capitol because uh, people are up to some fucking shenanigans." Just don't take over the Capitol and
I don't
look out
commit
for
a
police
violent,
officers
don't have
and
a
don't
violent
commit a right,
insurrection.
right. I
You
think
know,
we'll get
don't
beyond
break
that. I think we're
in.
probably just so close to that having happened.
Yeah.
But like, I want to get back to the point where we're sort of like, let's fucking go to the Capitol, but like,
Well, I'm just like
just not
frustrated
do what
that
they did.
that talking point, which was long a talking point of the left about how the government should belong to us and work for us, is now being reframed as a far right talking point justifying violent insurrection. And now that because of that, we're finding Republicans who are just fucking opportunists are coming in and trying to use talking points that actually do belong to the people. It is not for Mitch McConnell to say that the Capitol should not be heavily militarized. It's for us to say that because it's our capital and he works
Right.
for us. Like,
Yeah.
it's like frustrating that this flip has happened in the same
Yeah.
way that it's like the way that the word populism got flipped. Like, I hate when
Yeah.
Republicans steal something that belongs to us,
I know.
and they already
I know.
take so much. And
They
so
do.
I'm just annoyed. In any
Yeah.
case, obviously, they shot and killed the guy, so you should know he's black because just by that very fact,
Hmm.
we allowed a number of white insurrectionists to do exactly that with weapons, and all of them walked away just sort of like
Right.
with all their health. So,
Yeah.
in any case, the threat has been taken care of, but also it makes you wonder whether there are a lot of really unhappy people in America who are feeling really depressed because of the pandemic and don't know what to do with that
Yep.
depression, and makes you wonder if society is all that stable at the moment.
Right.
Just
No,
makes you have
seriously.
questions, makes you wonder
Oh,
things.
it sure does. Oh
In any
man,
case,
we've got an infrastructure bill, guys, like an actual
it
infrastructure bill that
happened.
has been put forward that has details that are being worked on in a package that people might vote on.
That is, and it's about the infrastructure, which is
Right,
so
the infrastructure.
unusual
Yes,
during an
I know.
infrastructure week. Um,
Yeah,
this is the first infrastructure week that has involved infrastructure, which has been pretty exciting. Um,
super exciting.
we heard a lot of lawmakers commenting on it just ahead of the release. There was
Right.
specifically some consternation about um, money for various kinds of care workers, whether those be like elder care or
Yep.
child care. Some of that money made it into the bill, some did not. There's not money for child care in this bill. Um, people are, I think, right to argue that that is a kind of critical part of the
Yep.
nation's infrastructure is people's ability to get child care. But we'll talk about
Yep.
that in a second. Here's
Uh-huh.
what the bill does have.
Yeah.
Big investments in electric vehicles, which
Mm-hmm.
is exciting. I mean, how many times do you think we're going to go through the electric vehicle thing?
I
This is
know.
like the
I don't
third
know.
round of electric vehicles. Remember when we had electric vehicles years and years ago and then they disappeared and then we had to watch a documentary called Who Killed the Electric Car, and then they came
Yep.
back and then they somehow
Uh-huh.
disappeared again because there's no
Right.
infrastructure because all of the filling electric vehicle stations had to be rebuilt after the first electric vehicles. And
Yep.
now apparently we're going for it again. So we'll
Yeah,
see.
and we're gonna have to do that again. There's like we're gonna create like some network of like 500,000 electric
Yeah,
vehicle stations because right now, if you drive an electric vehicle, you would be hard pressed to get anywhere. I mean, in
anywhere after
California,
your first
you
charge.
could probably get around okay, but
Maybe
you
you
know,
could get around like LA okay. You could like probably not get
Sure.
to another city except San Diego. Like you would
Yeah,
need to stay in
perhaps.
like pretty heavily civilized,
Perhaps.
settled area
Yeah.
in order to make
Yeah.
it. In any case, there's money. Ooh, hit the mic really hard.
Oh my.
It was exciting. There's
Yeah.
money for roads and bridges, modernizing transit systems, the Amtrak repairs that we've been putting off for
Yeah.
decades, airports, whatever, infrastructure.
Yeah,
um,
sure.
Money for uh, retrofitting and preserving homes and building homes.
Yep.
And that includes, I think that's money for rehabbing like 500,000 low and middle income homes or homes for low and middle income owners.
Yep.
Clean drinking water, which is
Yeah, sure.
something you
Let's do
don't
that.
want to have to say in a first world country, but here we are. Modernizing public schools, which many of which are crumbling and filled with lead.
Yep.
Broadband, which is actually, I think that's something that I think is actually like a fairly bipartisan issue. Getting broadband to rural parts of the country is
Yes.
really like a critical part of making sure that those parts of the country can have an economy and can support remote workers and also the companies that are already there. And so, like you see, as broadband gets farther into upstate New York, you see lots of people moving into areas that previously had basically no economy and being able to work remotely from there, but it requires there to be high-speed internet. So
Yep.
that's like a pretty serious equity issue for rural America. So I think that's one that I hear a lot of people in swing districts and moderate districts talk about. So that will be a good
Yep.
one for them. Public housing, VA hospitals, community college, like, plugging oil and gas wells and reclaiming abandoned mines, the stuff you think about. Now,
Yeah. I think the reclaiming abandoned mines, I think, was money specifically, basically pre-given to Joe Manchin to sort of entice him
correct.
to maybe vote for this. He won't, but I mean, here we are.
Right. Here we
Um,
are. Well, that's it. But this is like getting broadband to his rural constituents, getting some rehabbing of random ass abandoned mines, of which are all over West Virginia. Like these are things where he could then go to his district and be like, I got you these things.
yeah.
Again, he's not, I don't know what he's up to. I have a new
Yeah,
theory
maybe he'll
about
vote for this. I don't
Senate.
know.
My new theory is that Joe Manchin is not the problem at all. He's just being Joe Manchin. It is Kristen Sinema that I don't trust. Joe Manchin is acting the way someone whose entire state is like Bernie progressives and Trumpers would act. Like, as we've said many times, there's like no middle people. There's no like professional class that he's like trying to
Yep.
appeal to in West Virginia. That
Yep.
the bulk of the state is like people who feel probably rightfully very scared about the end of mining and people who want to be in unions. And so
Yep.
he's having to thread a very interesting needle
Yeah.
over there. The person who is not doing anything logical at all and is in no way representing the people that elected her to office is Kristen Sinema. She's
Right.
the one who you can't trust. Joe Manchin, you can trust to act the way that
Like Joe
someone in his
Manchin.
position would act.
Right.
I don't know what Kristen Sinema's up to. I couldn't tell
No
you
one does.
anything about what she's up to. She's like hanging out with Mitch McConnell. I'm worried she's going to change parties. I feel like she's underwater. Her numbers are underwater right now in Arizona, and Mark Kelly's are not. So that goes to show you exactly where the voters of Arizona's priorities are.
Yep.
And she's just continuing to be like a complete asshole to
Yep.
to everyone, literally, because we remember the thumbs down maneuver. In any case,
Sure do.
care workers, money for care workers. That was a big struggle. There's going to be $400 billion in there for improving access to community care or affordable homes for the elderly or people with disabilities, expanding Medicaid programs or services. And then there's also like a backlog in Medicaid that's preventing a lot of people from getting care. And then boosting pay for care workers. Obviously, that disproportionately affects women. It's disproportionately women of color. It's a job that earns like, $12 an hour on average. And so that's work that's incredibly difficult and incredibly specialized that people are not being adequately
Yep.
compensated for.
Yep.
And then the thing that's most interesting to me in here is how it will be paid for.
Yeah.
They are dubbing the tax plan that they're going to pass to pay for all of this the Made in America tax plan, which is
Sure. Call it whatever.
so like them to call it a stupid name.
Yeah.
It's going to increase the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28% And look, great, increase it to 100%. What do I care? I just want to remind everyone so that we don't feel like we should be compromising further on this point, that before those Trump tax cuts, the corporate tax rate was 35%.
It was 35% through the entirety of the Obama administration.
Right.
Well, maybe
Through
not
the
the entirety, but
entirety
certainly where
of
he
your
left
life,
it was at 35.
minus the last 4 years, it has been 35%. So,
Yeah.
and probably higher before that. I mean, it's probably been cut from,
Oh,
it was probably
it's
in the
definitely been
40s.
higher before that.
Yeah. So don't feel like you are getting a great deal with this 28% and hold him to the 28%, because one worry that I have is when you go in with a low bid like this as a Democrat, you almost always negotiate further back.
You're going to
And
negotiate further
I
down.
don't want to
Totally.
hear any bullshit about how this companies can't handle having
Right.
this kind of tax rate.
Or you're going to have Republicans who are going to want to negotiate that down from 28%, but they are also
course.
going to want to pay for it by cutting other things. And we
That's
have
right.
met Joe Biden before,
Uh-huh.
a man who has given many a speech emphatically declaring that he wants to cut a bunch of social programs
That's
from
right.
the Senate floor. I mean, roll the tapes, people.
Exactly.
So you're right. We're gonna have to hold our ground on this one.
Keep all of this in mind. And if they
Yeah.
try to nickel and dime us out of that 28%, only go higher. Tell them you're
Exactly.
happy to do 29.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go up because business was booming and rich people were still making money at 35%. And
Yes.
right now, what do we have? A Jeff Bezos who has more money than God, who's got so much money that if we just started reissuing his own money as money for the rest of us, he would never even notice. And that's a proposal that I've made that's an extension of modern monetary theory, the Nordstrom exception. But I mean, I feel like don't let any one company tell you that 28% is untenable for them. If their model requires them to be taxed at 21%, then it is not a viable or ethical model. So just know that with your life. It also eliminates some rules that let US companies pay no taxes on the first 10% of returns when they have their investments in other countries. So that's people just hiding money from us. It eliminates a few tax loopholes around intellectual property and, deductions for offshoring jobs and a bunch of bullshit that companies are pulling. And it also increases the minimum tax to 21%. So I think, it's got a few other things that are meant to close some loopholes in the corporate tax structure. If they were to get this tax plan through, the infrastructure plan would be fully paid for in 15 years and then reduce deficits for the following years.
And deficit reduction.
To Biden's office.
Oh my gosh. Who cares? But also that's a thing that you can say. But
you can,
I mean,
say it all over the place to Republicans who want to tell you that you can't raise the corporate tax rate because of all the deficits.
Right, exactly.
I feel like they will find a way to bring deficits into this, whether or not we're looking for them to. So it's good to have it in our back pocket. Like I said, it doesn't include any funding for childcare. That's the other big care economy that really, I think we saw huge job numbers this month. But one thing about those numbers is that only a third of those jobs went to women.
Still that not enough of them going to women. Yeah.
And women were already losing jobs at a disproportionate rate.
Yeah.
And part of that is related to childcare. Part of it is related to other kinds of care. And part of it is just related to how everyone's assholes to women. But part of that is related to the fact that women cannot, families can't afford childcare. It's actually cheaper for women not to work a lot of the time because of the childcare responsibilities that almost always get foisted on women. And so you have to have funding for childcare in order to actually rebuild infrastructure in a meaningful way and in an equitable way. So that's something that I think Katie Porter's been pushing him on that. There's been a few other people pushing him on that. I hope that we'll see some, not movement in this bill, but that he's got.
I think supposedly this is part one of a two-part bill. I think that is going to be dealing with.
I'm sure that will work brilliantly.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, we know what happens to the second part of a bill, right?
Right.
I mean, the same thing that often happens to the first part of a bill.
Exactly.
Doesn't get bad. But I have issues with this. Obviously, first and perhaps my biggest issue is that it has required me to see a lot of Pete Buttigieg on my fucking television this week.
Get that
And,
guy off TV. How hard is it? You know?
and that is just never, and let me say this again, never what I want. There is not one time where
Not a
I'm
single time
looking to hear his opinion on anything.
on
Um,
any one piece of information.
right. And also, I think this price tag right now is something like 2 trillion, but it's like over 8 years. So it's actually really, it's not a
Yeah, it's not.
huge price tag, and like I think that we're going to continue to get the details on this and to dig in to what's in it, but also like what isn't in it.
Yeah.
Um, we're sort of like just recently kind of figuring
Right.
out
It just
what this
dropped
thing
Wednesday.
looks like. Right, right, right. And so I think that, you had AOC out there this week saying that she felt like it should be closer to 10 trillion. That obviously is never going to fly with this administration because they're just going to be scared of the price tag, even if everything, yeah, even if all of the things that end up being that costing $10 trillion they
Right.
agree with. That's the other thing. I saw a couple Republicans being like, if we can get this price tag down, then we've probably got a real win here on our hands. It's sort of like, all right, motherfucker, tell me what are we taking out?
Right.
Right? Like people get scared of price tags, which they shouldn't be getting scared of because who cares about the deficit? Separate conversation.
Right.
about about
One
the
we're always willing to have, but
about the fakeness of the economy.
right.
But also, like, that's the thing about price tags is that they are, the summation of all of the things that are in the bill. So if
Yeah.
you like all $2 trillion worth of things that are in the bill, but you just want to cut the bill just because $2 trillion is too high, then you got to take some shit out of here that you like. So, like,
Right.
I just don't, when people start getting freaked out about price tags, it's like, okay, well, this is what all of the things that you wanted me to put in the damn bill cost.
Yeah.
Right? But
No.
I do think that like there is a danger here. You've got Biden out there sort of with both of these big bills that he is focused on, the COVID relief bill and then also this one, talking about how both of these things are once in a generation. And I agree with him that it may be the best time right now for this
Right.
generation to like actually get something like this passed, which is why I think to AOC's point is if we're talking
Go
about
big.
doing some X trillion dollars worth of infrastructure and like now's the time to do it because we can, then like I do think that you have to think about maybe spending a little bit more than like what does that come to like $2 trillion over 8 years. I mean that's really not, that's
Yeah.
pennies of the federal deficit or of the
Budget.
GDP or of the federal budget, right? I mean, like I think
Yeah.
I was seeing something recently. We used to use on a year-on-year basis back when the government fucking worked, like a large chunk of our GDP on infrastructure on a year-on-year basis, and we just don't any longer. And I don't think this bill even gets us back up to the point where we sort of used to be with what we were spending on infrastructure. So like I
Right.
do, you know, there's part of me that sort of is liking the fact that Biden has seemed to sort of like put some of these things out there in an attempt to be like, look, government can work. And I do, and he's been even talking about that, which is sort of like nice to hear from a Democrat because usually they're scared to say anything that the government could do anything good for somebody, right?
Right.
Um, but like, I think you do sort of like have to consider like, is this, if this is our once in a generation infrastructure bill, to also sneak in a bunch of stuff from the Green New Deal, which some of the stuff is, right? Obviously, it's not all in
Right.
there. Um,
The electric car stuff, some of the retrofitting stuff.
right. Like, you have to start thinking about whether you are going big enough. One of the annoying interviews I saw with Pete Buttigieg was they played the clip of AOC saying that she wanted it to be $10 trillion. And he was like, well, I think what there is consensus on is the need to go big. It's like,
Get
well,
out of
hers is 5 times bigger than
television.
yours. So I think maybe that feeling that you want to go big is not shared. You
He,
freaking asshole.
I can't
I
believe
hate
he's
him.
on television. I can't believe he's got a job. There are so many things objectionable about this whole situation with Pete Buttigieg. I don't even have a comment on the infrastructure aspects of what he's saying. I'm just
No,
mad in
no, I
general
don't
that I have
either.
to see his face.
Yeah.
This was all introduced just ahead of a huge jobs report that we added 916,000 jobs, most of them in things like it's like restaurants and public schools and
Right.
arenas and amusement parks and stuff like that. And
Things
there's
that are
always
reopening.
construction. just as some context, we're still really only at about half of the 22 million jobs that we lost in March of 2020. So we need these big gains, but in context, these big gains are not, like, there are still millions of people who were working who are not working.
Right.
So that's just a thing to keep in the back of your mind. These recovery numbers sound huge. We're used to following the jobs report, and it's like 114,000 jobs were added, and we're like, oh, good job, everyone. This is obviously a much bigger number than that, but we're like not even close to reclaiming the jobs that were lost in the last year. And that is an argument for why we need some continued assistance to people. For example, I'm getting very worried about how everyone is going to pay all this back rent that they're going to owe.
Totally.
There are some grant programs that are being set up and stuff, but like people are going to be just like up to their eyeballs in debt at the end of these moratoriums. And like, what are they going to do about that?
And so many of the other, relief things that were in that COVID bill were temporary also.
Exactly.
So like you're giving people help now, which was obviously needed, but then, you're going to get to a point where there's going to be a real fucking reckoning. And then the help has long since run out and you're not offering any more and people are still fucked. So,
in any case, while we worry about that, we've been entertaining ourselves with this Matt Gaetz or Gates. Listen, his last name has too many vowels in it. Sex trafficking story. Because what a story. First of all, this was broken over the course of like a few hours on Twitter in like what was the most operatic series of tweets that has ever been published. So
yeah, it was great.
The way it evolved was just like legendary. Like little inklings broke. And then he tried to say that the FBI was investigating his enemies and they were trying to smear him. But then we learned that it was probably actually all true, all the original accusations. And now really no one knows what to think. So first of all, Matt Gaetz is under federal investigation for sexual misconduct. They're investigating whether Gaetz, who is like a real life Beavis and Butthead. I can't remember which one was the one who looks like him.
Totally.
I think it was Beavis. But he looks just like he belongs in Beavis and Butthead, the cartoon. Had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old girl and paid for her to travel with him. If these are accurate allegations, then he has violated federal sex trafficking laws. Now, just as some context, the investigation is part of a broader investigation into someone who is definitely sex trafficking minors. This guy, Joel Greenberg, who is a Florida man.
Right. Well, so is Matt Gaetz, right? Or Gaetz.
Right. That's right.
I think it's Gaetz.
It's Gaetz.
Florida
it's
man.
Florida man.
All over the story.
Exactly. He was indicted last year on sex trafficking charges, and also misusing public funds and a bunch of other buying weapons and ammunition and a drone with those public funds and cryptocurrency. So he's up to straight shenanigans anyway. But so the Times broke the story about how Gaetz was being investigated. And Gaetz confirmed to Axios that he was under federal investigation and is worried about being criminally charged, but insisted in his response that he is actually the victim of all of this, has no part in none of these allegations are true. He had no part in any of this. Keeping in mind, he's currently engaged to a 26-year-old, and that he used to claim he was a very generous partner in his single days and paid for flights and hotel rooms along the lines of what was described in these accusations about the 17-year-old.
And he talked about it too.
He talked about it too, exactly. And later on, we're going to bring you a specific example of a time that he talked about it in terms that make you wonder. In any case, you may wonder why his enemies would be trying to smear him with this kind of a person of impeccable character like Matt Gaetz, smear him with this accusation. He claimed he and his family have been, quote, victims of an organized criminal extortion involving a former DOJ official seeking $25 million while threatening to smear my name. Now, he tries to imply that this is all Biden's fault, but the timing of all of this would suggest that this had to start under Bill Barr. So this predates Joe Biden being the president. This is a Trump era investigation that Bill Barr's DOJ undertook. Now, hilariously, after all of that, a couple of people, I guess, got some inspiration from his words and decided to extort his father after hearing about how he was being extorted in this fictional story about his DOJ extortion. And so now there's this additional extortion going on where
Right. Where does
Don Gaetz,
dad have to wear a wire or something like
right, like
crazy for?
they, so people wrote to his father and said that they had pictures of Matt Gaetz with child prostitutes and they would help him, but only if they got paid off. And the idea was that they're going to somehow use the money to locate like this former FBI agent who was kidnapped in Iran in 2007 and is presumed dead, but he was going to heroically be rescued by Matt Gaetz. And then Joe Biden would be so thrilled that he'd pardon Gaetz, and, you know, a plan like all plans, a plan
Yeah.
destined to succeed.
Whew.
Now, in a suspicious sign as all of this is going on, Gates' communications director, Luke Ball, resigned abruptly on Friday.
Ooh, oopsie.
So here's where we are now. Basically, if this very convoluted extortion plot is true, then that would be a wild turn of events, because currently what we have is a sitting congressman under investigation for sex trafficking linked to a guy who has already been indicted for sex trafficking,
Yeah.
and is definitely guilty of it. Now, it also should be noted that Gaetz has faced accusations of sexual misconduct before.
No, you don't say.
In January of 2020, just 1 year ago, another Republican congressman tweeted that Gaetz had created a game where members of the Florida House got, quote, points for sleeping with aides, interns, lobbyists, and married legislators. Gaetz, by the way, is only 38. So this is all going on among someone Brent and I's age, who
Right.
is kind of like both too young and too old to be doing this. He's like not yet like a lecherous old man, but he's also not young enough to not know better.
I know.
In any case,
Yeah.
he has obviously bragged about his sexual exploits to other lawmakers. He showed them nude photographs of women that he slept with. And some of these photos he has shared with people while at work. He was the only lawmaker to vote against the anti-human trafficking bill that they passed recently in Congress. And
Right.
a bunch of his colleagues have spoken out about his love of alcohol and illegal drugs, as well as his proclivity for younger women.
Oh yeah.
But also,
there are. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it should be noted that he has noted his own proclivity for younger women.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, and there's a lot of reports actually out there that like Republicans right now do not want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. Not just because of like obviously like who wants to be sticking up for a guy who is like maybe like sex trafficking minors, but also many of them I think have been looking for a great excuse to maybe treat Matt Gaetz as a pariah, right? And now
rid themselves of the Matt Gaetz phenomenon.
Right, exactly. And now this lands in their lap. And now it's great because they don't have to talk to him. They don't want to talk to him. They never wanted to talk to him.
No one has ever wanted to talk to Matt Gaetz.
Right. Except Donald Trump.
Donald Trump, as you might imagine, another noted human trafficker, probably had a lot to share with Matt Gaetz as they share similar interests.
And if you're wondering where Q is in all of the, pedophilia, human trafficking, sex trafficking angle here, the answer would be nowhere to be found.
Keep wondering.
Sticking up for Matt Gaetz is what they're doing.
That's right.
Right now. Yeah.
That's right.
So anyway, it wasn't pizza. It wasn't Pizzagate, guys.
Yeah. How could
there was no
they
Democratic
compare this
pedophilia ring in the basement of
pizzeria,
whatever that pizzeria was called, Cosmic Pizza or something like that.
Yeah.
It was actually happening, and it was happening in Congress, is where it was happening.
I was going to say this was happening in plain sight, so that's not what Q's up to. Q is only talking about invisible sex trafficking. The visible sex trafficking, no concern of Q's.
Sure.
Also, I've been watching the Q documentary. Here's a question.
God, I gotta start.
Is Steve Bannon Q?
I don't know. Yeah, sure,
I feel like the documentary makes a compelling case, and then at the end is like, but it's probably not. And then you're like, but who is it then? Because this feels like, I think it would require someone of like real like mastermind computer hacker potential to be Q. And like the proclamations Q is making are so ridiculous and inane that they could not possibly come from somebody who is also aware of what IP address they're working from.
Oh, right. Well, and I think Steve Bannon has the mind for this, right? I mean, it's sort of like it's like it's like a movie. He has, I'm not saying any of his films were good, but he's a filmmaker, right? He's written. I mean, so I'm just saying, like he could dream up this whole insanity. It could come from the mind of Steve Bannon.
I've decided to wholeheartedly cling to the maybe conspiracy theory that it's Steve Bannon, and it's brought me a little comfort because I feel like knowing that it's Steve Bannon, like a lot of pieces of the Q situation make much more sense to me.
Sure.
Not any of the ideology of
Oh,
Q.
right. Yeah.
I just mean
Just
like
how we ended up here.
logistics of Q, how
Yeah.
we ended up in the Q
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah.
That makes much more sense to me with Steve Bannon as Q than with an actual mystery random person being Q.
Right.
So I've decided to if you call me about this from now on, I'm just going to tell you it's Steve Bannon. I'm not even going to bat an eye. In any case, getting back to Matt Gaetz, one of the ways that we know that he wines and dines 17-year-olds is because he insisted as much on Tucker Carlson this week when he goes on Tuesday to have an interview with Tucker Carlson. First of all, tries to rope Tucker Carlson into this crisis by saying,
Twice.
I'm not the only person on screen right now who's been falsely accused of a terrible sex act. And Tucker Carlson is like, fuck off, dude. Like, he is not interested in getting involved in this. And then Matt Gaetz suggests that Tucker Carlson actually met the 17-year-old in question.
Yes.
Because they had dinner with her. He brought her to a dinner with Tucker Carlson.
And his
so
wife.
He says, your wife was there and I brought a friend of mine. You'll remember her. Tucker Carlson is like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Now, I would obviously deny this, but also there's no way he doesn't know what he's talking about, because I would definitely remember it if a colleague or someone in my general purview brought a 17-year-old to dinner.
Yeah, and as much as I hate Tucker Carlson, as much as I feel like Tucker Carlson probably didn't want to necessarily like call Matt Gaetz out in this interview because they're both just a similar brand of asshole, right. I also feel like Tucker Carlson at this point was not trying to like I believe that he doesn't remember this because like
I believe that
because I feel like Tucker Carlson would have
currently
been, like,
hates Matt Gaetz.
Well, that's what and if I was Tucker Carlson and I did remember it, I would have been like, yeah, I remembered it. It was fucking skeezy. You can't be doing that.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right? Like,
I feel like
yes, actually, I do remember it was a 17-year-old, and my wife and I thought it was ridiculous.
He might have a problem of having had similar run-ins in his own life. He might not be in a place where he's able to make those kinds of moral stands.
Yeah, well, he's a skis bag for sure. I mean, let's be honest. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. In any case, that story is getting more hilarious every day, in part because Matt Gaetz can't just shut up. It's like every time there's a new accusation, he gets in front of a camera and says something even more insane.
Well, that's what I saw some article that was like that he was sort of like operating from like the Trump school of this, where you just keep talking. You just keep talking and talking and talking, and you project whatever it is that happened to you onto other people, right? Oh, it's actually I'm being investigated, but it's because of this, completely other made up thing where I'm, somebody is trying to get $25 million embezzled or whatever. He just keeps making things up and adding more layers onto the thing, which is probably also why Q is sort of like really just feeling like, that, it's like, I'm sure
you
there's sort of like,
get away. There's no way in.
Right, exactly. And it's just like, he won't shut up about it, which I think maybe he thinks is working, but it is not.
It's not working at all.
It is not working. No.
It is working if the goal was to develop a hilarious, like ever evolving story.
Yeah, it's working for comedy, but that's it.
Yeah,
it's not working. It's not working as crisis management.
I would contend that Matt Gaetz was not up to the challenge of this kind of crisis management anyway. So we were really only aiming for comedy.
Yeah,
I think if you think about it.
Yeah.
In any case, we have a cause and effect situation going on right now in fundraising among Democrats, in which, so as you may know, AOC and other members of the progressive left have had not great relationships with the DCCC.
No.
Because the D-Trip has been essentially not supporting progressive challengers and then also trying to oust the ones that exist, the progressives that already exist.
Correct.
So they have at various times, refused to pay their D-Trip dues and whatever. So AOC is like awash in cash because she's like a fundraising machine. And there are a bunch of very vulnerable Democrats. They have a very slim majority in the House. They are very worried about losing a bunch of swing districts. And so she sent a bunch of them $5,000 donations. Now, obviously, she did not send those donations through D-Trip, because who can trust what D-Trip is using their money for? If you're
Yeah, she didn't
AOC,
want to
I
give
certainly
D-Trip
wouldn't.
any money.
No, which I can understand.
Obviously.
Now, everyone is mad because a bunch of those swing district Democrats are fretting about whether to return the money so that the GOP won't turn it into an attack ad. The faux rage about this is so absurd because A, the GOP is going to have an attack ad about AOC, whether or not she donates $5,000 to your campaign. And a lot of these are cash-strapped campaigns. They are not AOC campaigns. AOC doesn't need more money. She has all the money she could hope to have. Connor Lamb is not raking in the donations, though.
No, because who would want to give Connor Lamb a single cent?
Exactly. And fucking shut up. So a bunch of these people, part of this is that people are mad because D-Trip actually gave AOC's campaign the wire information for all these campaigns without checking with everyone first. So like this could have been avoided if D-Trip had been like slightly more responsible themselves.
Yeah, sure. Blame the D-Trip. That's fine with me.
Right. Blame them. And like a bunch of people are like, Katie Porter is happy to take a $5,000 donation from AOC.
Yeah, of course.
She's not trying to care about that. But Connor Lamb, Carolyn Bordeaux, and Elisa Slotkin are all saying that they're going to return the money. And to that, I say primary those fools.
Yeah.
Give the $5,000 to somebody else who can
fine.
primary them.
Yeah, I know.
Nobody needs Connor Lamb to be the congressperson from anywhere.
And the thing that is so maddening about this is that why make an issue of it? Because it's like look, Republicans are gonna do what Republicans do, and that is make an attack ad where they tie Connor Lamb to AOC and Nancy Pelosi and Joseph Stalin and whoever else that they decide that they want to tie Connor Lamb to. It doesn't matter whether any of those people gave Connor Lamb $5,000, right? I mean, every single Republican attack ad last year had something about socialism in it, and it had Nancy Pelosi in it, and probably had Bernie Sanders in it, and probably had AOC in it. And most of the people that those attack ads were run against had never even so much as met AOC. So, like, take the fucking money, shut your mouth, and just know that there's going to be an attack ad because you're running a political campaign and people make attack ads. You dumbass, Connor Lamb. Ugh, I hate him. I already hated him, and now
he's the worst.
Extra.
I mean, he's the actual worst. He's like the epitome of the worst one. They're obviously making a big show of it so they can say that they returned the money, but this is actually like something that I think people were fairly sort of like impressed by for party unity reasons. What Connor Lamb is nothing but a pain in AOC's ass. Like her giving him money is just about maintaining a majority, which is something that Connor Lamb can also say to his constituents, because he can say, I'm a huge pain in her ass. We're trying to have Democrats elected to Congress here. So sorry about that. Like, it's also got political liability for her because her supporters don't want their money going to Connor Lamb.
Well, that's the other thing too. I mean, I've got a lot of problems with this anyway, just because like I understand wanting to keep the majority, but like at what cost? And also like what is the majority doing anyway? If it's sort of a slim majority that involves Connor Lamb. So I agree. I mean, she claims to be a member of DSA. She claims to be a member of Justice Democrats who got her elected. So like, I don't understand why
she's funneling money to them.
I don't understand why she's funneling money to Connor Lamb and whoever else. Anyway,
well, I think she's essentially
I've got some issues with her right now anyway, but
I think she's trying to get around the D-Trip opposition while still being able to say I'm a team player. So that like, I think this is about showing sort of opposition to D-Trip.
I just would like her to stop.
I can be in favor of, but that's
Personally, I don't want her to be.
Yeah.
That's not why I think she's there.
No, exactly. This is also why you need to continually bring fresh blood into Congress.
Totally.
Because surviving there requires her to do some of these things. And that means that there need to always be new people who can be as free of those obligations as she was in her first term.
Yeah.
And like, I get that this becomes part of your situation, part of your obligation as you try to become someone who actually can get roles in leadership or get onto the committees that you want or whatever. I get that this is what happens, especially if you are, the biggest fundraiser in the caucus.
Yep.
But I think keeping in mind that there are people who need to come in behind her to continue the work of not owing anyone anything is also important. So in any case, that's chaos. I'm mad at Democrats about a different story this week.
Same.
They are talking about changing the Democratic primary schedule. Great. Needs to happen. I get it.
Yep.
They are not talking about like one single good idea, though, in talking about changing the Democratic primary. So they're people, DNC members, leaders, whatever, are talking about pushing South Carolina and Nevada to the front of the primary schedule, or holding all 4 of those first primaries on the same day, or having South Carolina have the first primary. And
Fuck
look,
them.
Fuck South Carolina.
You know what?
Get.
Oh, so go ahead.
No,
sorry.
I get that you want a state that isn't just 100% white people to be your first primary state, and I agree with that requirement, or that obligation. South Carolina does not vote for Democrats in the general, though. There are states with Black people in them that do, or that can, at least, that are at least in the game. Put one of those states first. Who fucking cares what Jim Clyburn thinks you should do? There is no reason to put a staunchly Republican state as the deciding first state in your primary. They already have too much say in the primary cycle. The South in general has too much say in the primary cycle.
I know.
They all go before the states that are actually the backbone of the Democratic Party. And like I said, there are it is not that I'm saying that we should have 2 lily white states be the first 2 states. And I get that is problematic, but South Carolina is not the only state that can accomplish having a more diverse and more representative electorate voting in the primary.
I totally agree. I agree with you. I also have.
Well, I'm right, so you have to.
And I right. I also have an opinion that sort of agrees with you, but also sort of almost makes me want to let them say to just let them go first. And the reason is because one of the reasons that they keep talking about wanting to, have a different state go first is that Iowa and New Hampshire, which don't look like the rest of the country or the rest of the party or whatever, have an outsized role in framing the presidential contest, right? But what I would say to that, and I understand in the sense that it's all about Iowa at the very beginning, Iowa, New Hampshire, New Hampshire, New Hampshire.
We talk about rural issues, we talk about farming, we talk about dairy, we talk about.
But, just to go back just to recent elections, in 2008, Obama and Clinton split those first 2 states. That primary went on forever. Neither Iowa or New Hampshire decided anything. Clinton and Sanders also split them in 2016. That primary went on forever. And it was really states like South Carolina and southern states that allowed Clinton to win that primary, even though she lost Iowa. 2020, Joe Biden had his ass handed everywhere he went before he got to South Carolina. So it was really South Carolina that picked the president this time. In 1992, Bill Clinton didn't even show up to Iowa. Granted, that was because Tom Harkin was running. But I mean, we have a lot of examples over the last 30 years where the winners of either of those 2 states, or the winner of Iowa, then would still go on to lose in New Hampshire, or these 2 states don't, in my opinion, actually have an outsized influence on who ultimately becomes the candidate for president. So on some level, let South Carolina go first, and then we can move on and forget that it ever happened.
Here's what I will say, though, in response to that. Because I see what you're saying, and I think one of the arguments that Clyburn is making here is that South Carolina ends up choosing the president every year, and I think he is mistaking causation for what's the saying? He's making. I think he assumes that it is because South Carolina is so important and helpful to the process that they are choosing it, and it's actually just an accident of where they come in the cycle.
Yeah, it's the placement. It is. It 100% is.
But both Iowa and New Hampshire are states that swing both ways, that can vote for Democrats, and therefore there is value in talking about the issues that Iowans care about to them and other states for that full year before the cycle. Now, like I said, those aren't representative issues, and I get that. But framing an entire campaign around the issues of a state that will not vote for Democrats is a waste of everyone's time, money, and energy. South Carolina's specific issues have nothing to do with the issues that are going to drive Democrats to the polls. Now, I would say put Georgia first. Georgia has shown that they can show up for Democrats. Georgia has shown that their issues actually are meaningful issues, that they, that they share the needs of other Democratic voters, that they are responsive to things that other Democratic voters care about. Put them first. I have no problem with that. Don't ask candidates to spend one full year campaigning to people that will never get them a single electoral vote. You are wasting millions of dollars in campaign funds on those early states. It is a whole economy in Iowa. We went there twice during the process. We know how much money gets spent in the campaign cycle in Iowa that becomes sort of like a part of the Iowa economy. One of the reasons Iowa doesn't want to lose this is it's like a huge economic boon to them.
Totally.
And I'm sure the same thing is true in New Hampshire. But at least when they are talking about issues that affect Iowans, they are talking for votes. They are not just talking for an exercise. So do not waste your time going and asking candidates to spend millions of dollars in a state that will literally never elect them. And don't let a man, if Jamie Harrison becomes the person who argues for it, because I think Clyburn was then like, he went and got involved and made a bunch of comments about it and then was like, but I'm going to let Jamie Harrison handle it. Jamie Harrison didn't win his fucking election, though. He doesn't know how to win statewide in South Carolina. There is not, until they can prove that they are in the game, they should not get an outsized role at all in the election. They should be late in the election. Let another Southern state that actually has shown that they are able to elect Democrats, so therefore the money that's spent there isn't just wasted.
I agree.
Let them be the first ones.
Or,
South Carolina.
I agree, right? Yeah, I totally agree.
I'm so sick of everyone's reverence for South Carolina as if somehow South Carolina is who brings diverse voices to the primary. There are tons of other states that could bring diverse voices to the primary. New York State could bring diverse voices. California could bring diverse voices. Certainly Georgia could. There is no reason that a state that is not even in the game at all for Democrats should have any role in choosing who the candidate is.
Yeah.
It's just dumb. It's dumb campaigning. It's a dumb waste of everyone's time and money.
Yeah. Yep.
In any case, that's what I have to say.
I would like more primaries
happening.
I would like more primaries happening early.
Yes. I think let's get them in there all at once.
I mean, I'm for that. Also, if you want a freaking sample of the country, just in terms of demographics, because I feel like it's also the reason that Harry Reid is saying that it should be Nevada is because they have obviously a large sample size of
Hispanic voters.
Hispanic voters. I mean, like go to Texas, which is also getting close to turning blue.
Closer than fucking South Carolina.
And that looks like America because they have a bunch of rural issues there also. But like what the other suggestion that I have that they will never take me up on is like, let's do fucking California first.
Well, it is like mind-boggling to me that there are states that really do look demographically like the whole country.
We have everything
and
here.
States
literally
are
everything.
New York and California. Yep. And they don't want to have any of those states have any role in choosing anything. And the idea that they think it has to be some tiny state because they somehow think that the media market has to be cheap in campaigns that go on for a full year that are like, I don't buy that the voters of California, like if candidates had to talk about the issues of the voters in California, they would have to talk about the issues of every region in America. They would have to talk about agricultural voters, rural voters.
That's what I was going to say.
They would have to talk about farming to their heart's content. They would have to talk about water resource management, which is something that the entire Southwest struggles with. They would have to talk about urban issues because, 3 of the largest cities in America are located in California. They would have to talk about suburban issues because the entire LA is just one giant suburb. I mean, they would have to talk about issues that affect they would have to talk about immigrant issues because there is a huge immigrant population in California. They would have like all of the things that we are acting like Iowa and New Hampshire can't provide are not actually provided by South Carolina, but they are provided by some of the
They're not.
larger states.
Yeah.
And if you want to go with a smaller state, you have to go with a state that you're not asking candidates to waste tons of money campaigning in. You can't. The reason that people were doing Iowa and New Hampshire is because it's cheap and easy to campaign there, but also because those are states that you actually gain something from campaigning in. Your relationships there matter in the general. Like your relationship, it's just a waste of everyone's time to go campaign in South Carolina. I don't know. That made me so livid just because I'm sick of Jim Clyburn, but also the implication that like the benefit that South Carolina provides to that early part of the cycle couldn't be better provided by like almost any other state is infuriating to me. Like every state on South Carolina's border is a better state to have be the state.
Right.
Like literally, and that is the only state in its entire
Do it in
region.
North Carolina. That would
do
be
it
better.
in North Carolina. Do it in Virginia.
Virginia.
I mean, that would be a great state to do it in. Like, just like use your heads, you guys.
Yeah, I agree.
I can't with anyone.
Yeah.
But specifically with DNC people, I can't. In any case, here's another thing is they're talking about should we have like a Rust Belt block so people can go campaign in the Rust Belt, and should we, which don't let all the Rust Belt states vote early at the same time. It's the same reason that we don't like, they let the South all vote super early at around the same time. And that's how we end up with really conservative Democrats running for president all the time.
Right.
Don't let any region vote regionally early at the same time, therefore taking away any meaningful vote that anyone in the large states that have the base of the Democratic Party located in them. Every word of this article infuriated me because every single idea it mentioned was stupid.
Yeah.
I would say the only non-stupid idea, and this is only marginally non-stupid, that they mentioned was the idea of just going and doing it in Pennsylvania first.
Yeah, I'm not mad at that.
That's not a terrible idea.
No.
That's got all the terrible and good qualities of every state all rolled into one.
Yeah.
You know, but like, you can't, if you're going to rethink this, and it should be rethought, don't come up with a worse idea.
Right. Neither of us are arguing that we should leave it as is.
Right. It's not working as is. And they are talking about also getting rid of caucuses in general, which I'm not surprised to hear, given our experience watching said caucuses. But every other idea that was mentioned was a bad one.
Was bad. I agree. Yep.
Like, I can't do anything. I can't do anything with this information. I don't know what to say other than that you should absolutely not trust anyone at the DNC to have a good idea about this. Why are they so beholden to these? Like, why are they so beholden to South Carolina? Like,
well, that's what I was going to say.
It's like they can only think in terms of the 4 states that are already going first. Like any state can go first, you guys.
That's what I was going to say. When I was looking back to look at who had won some of those states, I mean, I remembered most of them, but like when I was looking at that Clinton one initially, it was Iowa, and then it was New Hampshire, and then it was like Maine, and then it was South Dakota, and then it was like and he actually went that was a weird primary, by the way. He went a long stretch before he won another thing after New Hampshire. But like South Carolina was like way down the way. Like we are not, this is not a thing that like is written,
right in stone.
We didn't etch this on stone tablets. I mean, like, so we can make South Carolina the 50th state to vote in the caucus if we fucking want to. And we might want to.
In terms of what it offers us, in terms of campaign funds actually being beneficial to Democrats, it should be. Because literally every state on its border would be money better spent.
Yeah.
For another side point before we move on from this, why is Harry Reid involved in this conversation at all? Did he not just basically lose control of his own Democratic Party because the entire Democratic Party of Nevada
is gone? Crash and burns. Gone.
So don't call him. He doesn't know what we should do.
No.
He has no idea what's going on.
But the fact that it's being run by DSA members makes me feel like let's just do it there. Maybe let's listen to Harry Reid. Hey everyone, listen to Harry Reid. Harry Reid knows.
You'll never hear me say that, but you will hear me suggest that I don't feel terrible about Nevada anymore. So,
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
in any case, other good news, Cuomo legalized recreational marijuana in New York State this week.
Sure.
That makes New York the 15th state to legalize marijuana, and it's legal immediately. It's not going to be sold for like another 1 or 2 years. You can buy up to 6 marijuana plants though. Um,
Mm.
Now, given this long stretch of stuff that he's been up to recently, my parents and I have been joking all week that if we could find like 5 more women to accuse him of sexual harassment, like we could have single payer in the state by the end of the month. Like if we really put our heads together, and listen, there are 5 additional women who hate Andrew Cuomo somewhere in New York State, because I think what we've learned in the process of all these accusers coming out is that almost everyone hates Andrew Cuomo
All of
who's
them
ever
do.
met him.
Right. Right.
And so I think that we could definitely reasonably look for 5 more women, but I feel like if we could just put a little more heat on him, I mean, the possibilities are endless, you guys.
No.
We have supermajorities in both chambers. We have a lot of really active members of the Senate and Assembly here who are ready to move. Like, let's get out there. let's
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
get active.
He's
Instead of
willing to do
making him
anything to save
resign,
himself right now.
right? Instead of making him resign, let's make him pass progressive policy that he doesn't approve of.
Yep.
I think that would be the best service he could do to all of us.
Yep.
And this is actually like in New York State in particular, this is like a long-standing equity issue because we had very strict drug laws until very recently here, the Rockefeller drug laws. And so there were incredibly harsh penalties on people carrying very minor amounts of drugs or being caught with very minor amounts of drugs here. They were enforced in an incredibly discriminatory manner. And even just last year, Black and Latino New Yorkers made up 94% of marijuana-related arrests. That is despite the fact that statistics show that more white New Yorkers are using marijuana than any other race.
Yeah, well,
So
wasn't stop and frisk an attempt to
yeah,
get people on like minor drug charges or like who had a small
absolutely.
amount of drugs, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's so this is like this is a problematic policy in many states, but it has been enforced in an especially discriminatory manner in New York for a
Right.
really long time, and it has had incredibly harsh penalties. And so
Yeah.
the legacies of those penalties has also been its own problem. So
Sure.
it was very important that that happened here. Also, it's going to make the state a ton of money. So, like, you guys, if you're not legalizing marijuana, then you're just basically throwing money in the toilet
I know.
because they're expecting it to bring in like $350 million a year.
Yeah, I don't know why more red states are not taking a note on this.
I
It's
mean,
just
that's just like free money.
yeah,
You're just
you sell it and then
raking
you tax
in.
it. Yep.
Yeah. So the bill also expunges a lot of criminal records for people who've been arrested on marijuana charges. They're going to put 40% of the revenue into communities of color and grant 50% of the licenses to, quote, social equity applicants and small businesses. So they're looking to also make sure that the business is well integrated, but we'll see how that
Good. I
works.
mean, because that's a thing that
But
has
in any
maybe
case,
not often been done in some of these states that have
that hasn't been done in a
legalized
lot
it.
of other states.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, but like there is so much to make up for here with the way the drug laws have been enforced, just
I'm
in
sure.
not just, I mean, enforced in a discriminatory manner in the past, but also just enforced in an unnecessarily harsh manner in the past.
Right.
So I feel like that it is sort of on New York State to do this as responsibly as
Yeah.
possible. It will allow localities to pass laws banning dispensaries, but you can't stop people in your town from smoking pot,
No.
even if they can't buy it there. So deal with it. We also have dry towns in upstate New York. Life is funny.
Uh-huh.
In any case, speaking of state
Yeah.
laws, Georgia, a place that has I think overstepped what they could capably handle as evil Republicans.
Totally.
This voting law, there is so much sort of general pressure to oppose it that corporations are having to step in. And I would
Yeah.
argue, just for anyone in Georgia who's listening, / if Brian Kemp listens to our podcast, which I'm sure he does, corporations are who actually have free speech in America. So if they are opposing you, then like you actually don't beat corporate America. You maybe bargain with corporate America.
Yeah.
I get that you beat voters constantly because you're assholes and you don't care about democracy. But the only people who have actually like unbridled free speech in America are corporations because money
Yep.
is speech and they're the ones who have all the money. So
Right. And
when
money is also power.
corporation
It's speech
and
and it's
money is
power.
power, exactly, and speech and power are often the same thing. Um,
Sadly.
when corporations feel that they have to step in and oppose your law, then you've fucked it up. And as much as you might have short-term victories in this march to mayhem, you can't actually beat corporate America. So just like think to yourself, just
Yeah.
know to yourself. And also like this law in particular, like I think that one thing that Republican, like I get that there's going to be a ton of these laws and we're not going to know about all of them. And some of them are going to sneak in and we're never going to find out. And people aren't going to go and volunteer in those states and it's going to be terrible. Georgia is going to have like, just like every free liberal person or progressive person in America just like roaming the streets for election day.
Oh
There's
yeah.
going to be so much attention focused on how their election is conducted, and it is going to be like turnout central, because who wouldn't turn out when the government's trying to tell you you can't vote? Like
Yep.
it's going to encourage so much more election activity than you actually want. Let me tell you how Republicans win, because it seems like they have forgotten. Republicans win by depressing the vote. And by depressing the vote, I don't mean actually suppressing the vote. I mean by creating a dynamic by which Democrats don't feel like going to the polls because it sounds annoying, because their candidates suck and your candidates seem like more people are interested in them. And so they just don't bother showing up.
Yeah.
You don't win when you just try to like base your winning on like not letting people who want to vote.
Yeah.
Those people bring like 10 friends with them. Like you're not going to actually beat that system. You have
Totally.
to create a dynamic by which Democrats don't want to vote. You don't
Yeah.
create a dynamic by which Democrats are not able to vote, because then they'll wait for 10 hours in line without water if they have to, just to piss you off. Like,
Yep.
it's like they don't understand the simplest things about human psychology. In any case,
Surprise.
Major League Baseball pulled an All-Star game from Georgia because of the voting law. They're in
Yep.
hot water with Delta. They're in hot water with everyone.
Yep.
But Major League Baseball, I think, has had the strongest reaction to this, which is interesting because I wouldn't say that Major League Baseball is like a bastion of progressivism.
No.
But the commissioner has been pretty unequivocal in his distaste for this law.
Yep.
So that's pretty exciting.
It is. Yeah. More of that, please.
More of that, please. Also, we're still waiting for the results of this Bessemer vote. Amazon finally apologized and admitted that they have heard of people peeing in bottles, but they're claiming those people are only delivery drivers, while we all know that people in their factory and in their warehouses are also peeing in bottles.
Yeah.
So whatever, Amazon.
Yeah.
But they, my favorite part of the story that we pulled this from was the line, "The company insists its workers enjoy good pay and benefits by US standards." What does that mean?
You know what it means.
Amazon workers are unionized everywhere else in the world. So
right. It means they
what does that
don't
mean?
enjoy any of those things by world standards.
By world standards, they have nothing. By US standards, which means nothing. By no standards.
Yeah.
But we're still waiting. We should have the vote by this week.
Yeah, I guess
the public portion will be happening next week.
Right. The whole first part of it, actually, because I kept checking every day, and then finally I found an article. It's like, why we don't know yet. And I was like, oh, and they've got to go through the whole thing. Like, these were sent out in January. Some people don't work there any longer. Like, the whole first part is just like literally checking every single ballot against like the actual sort of like roles of people who are like working there now, and whether
It's and then Amazon's probably going to challenge them if they.
Right.
Exactly. They're going to be annoying challenges that are time wasters.
Both parties can challenge literally any of the votes that were cast. So it's a whole thing. There are people from the National Labor Relations Board who are there to sort of like watch over the actual vote of this. So like that's good anyway. So sort of like takes the chances for shenanigans, down a little bit. But yeah, it's going to be a minute before we know. It might be this week. But like if you're wondering why you haven't heard, it's just because it's not a thing where you get ballots and then you like count 3,000 ballots and then you're done. Like that's not what's happening.
Whatever happens here, this is like a big deal for the labor movement. So like don't fret if this doesn't work out. Like it would be great if it does, because fuck Amazon. But like also first of all, there have been like calls suddenly to unionize like all sorts of places because of this. It's inspired like a million other people to try to unionize. And also they can try this again. A lot of the
Well, yeah,
time,
right.
because of the tactics that companies use to try to suppress the vote, to try to get people scared about their jobs and things, like it takes a while for people to get educated about how a union would benefit them. And so don't feel like this is the end of the line. This is really inspiring and exciting, in part because this is going to, in the same way that those early teacher strikes launched teacher strikes all over the country in places
Yeah.
that you were like,
Huh?
Oklahoma teacher strike,
Right.
what? you know
Yeah.
like this is what's happening with this as well. So this is very exciting no matter what
Yeah.
happens. I just feel like a lot of people, because the vote's been taking so long, have suddenly been like, oh, they're never going to win, like have been starting to get going through
Yeah.
the stages of grief. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep everyone's spirits high.
Yes.
um
Good. I like it.
yeah, we had the Derek Chauvin trial this week. Still, listen, I have only one comment about this trial, which is that it's just very sad. People keep bursting into tears on the stand because obviously Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd in full view of everyone who was there, and they are all being forced to describe a murder that took place in front of them over an
Yeah.
excruciatingly long period of time. And so the whole thing is just like incredibly depressing.
It really is. And so many, I mean, obviously, obviously, the people that they have been interviewing this week have been mostly eyewitnesses. And so obviously that has been something that stays, these people are never going to forget this. And obviously being, recall or being asked to recall every single detail of it, in many instances being asked to watch video of it, has obviously been hard. So yes, there has been like a lot of crying of witnesses this week, and I think it's been certainly powerful testimony. But you're right. I mean, it has been hard to watch, which, I mean, I suppose is good in the sense that like that is probably making this hard for jurors too. I mean, in the way that you would want them to like
Right.
come up with a guilty verdict. But it is sort of, I often am a person who will watch CNN or just have it on in the background during the day, and there have been moments where that has not been what I have been looking for this
Oh,
week.
well,
That's
that's what
not
you
to say
do.
that I don't understand that it's very important to do, but you're right. It's been hard to watch.
Yeah.
Um, so, which means that the prosecution is doing a good job.
Yeah.
So,
Good,
keep
good
it up.
work.
Yeah,
Good work.
keep right.
Weaving a terrible, sad story.
Keep doing that. Just know that I might not be watching while you're doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the words of Donald Trump, other than that, happy Easter.
This guy.
His
Listen,
Easter
do we
message
do we
was
get him back on Twitter somehow?
his
Is that
Easter
a terrible
message
thing to
was
say?
just, it's like a paragraph of just like unsubstantiated crazy rantings, and then at the
Still,
very end he just says, other than that, happy Easter.
yeah, it's like another election rant.
Yeah, well, he's never
Like,
gonna forget that,
well,
but
obviously.
he has nothing else in his life.
Yeah.
He's a guy, didn't he like recently crash someone's wedding and then deliver a long rambling speech at the wedding? I think it like I think it was a wedding at Mar-a-Lago or
Was it
something,
at
which
Mar-a-Lago? Yeah,
probably, of course, and he was like dressed like the maitre d', and
sure.
he just like arrived at the wedding and then like gave an unsolicited speech about nothing that included all of his usual hits, nothing of having to do with the wedding, and then just disappeared.
Amazing.
So he's really living a kind of life. I don't know if it's
That
his best
guy.
or anyone's best, uh,
Wild.
but it's one of the lives at Mar-a-Lago.
I don't know, man. That
I
guy.
don't know. That guy. In any
Yikes.
case,
Other than
that's
that,
the news
happy
this week.
Easter.
Other than that, happy Easter. We'll be back next
We'll talk
week.
to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.